January 21st, 1998. I'll never forget it. It was the year when Resident Evil 2 was released, forever changing survival horror as the world knew it. Okay, well, I was actually -6 years old in 1998, so I wasn't alive during the release. However, I have extensive knowledge on the Resident Evil franchise and have played almost all of the games, specifically both the original and remake of Resident Evil 2. So I feel qualified in comparing the original 1998 title to the 2019 remake. There's an ongoing debate about which version of the game is actually better, and I intend to get to the bottom of this. So without further ado, let's delve into the comparison of both games. The core mechanics are the same in both the original and remake. Players have to explore different environments, solve puzzles, find key items, backtrack to use them, and fight or dodge enemies in order to make it out of Raccoon City. Resources are very limited, and players have to carefully manage their inventory to make sure they don't run out of space. In the 1998 version, players only have 8 inventory slots, but they can find a side pack later that gives them 2 more spaces. While in the 2019 version, players start out with 8 slots for both characters. As they progress through the game, they can find hit pouches which give them more space in their inventory. If players collect all of them, they can end up with 20 inventory slots. In the remake, players have the ability to select a specific amount of items they want to either bring with them or leave in their item box. In the original, players can only bring or stash a full stack, not a specific number of items. Players are also unable to choose where their items go in their inventory, but in the remake, they have the ability to organize which slot items go into. The movement mechanics are drastically different between the two games. The original game uses fixed camera angles and static backgrounds. This means players have to use tank controls in order to move through the environments, which often feels very clunky to players and is difficult to get the hang of. However, in the remake, the environments are fully rendered in a 3D space, allowing players to explore using an over-the-shoulder third-person camera. This provides a smoother, more modern gameplay experience for players, while still keeping the same survival horror mechanics. It also makes the game far more accessible to players. After all, who nowadays is willing to learn how to use tank controls? Okay, well, besides for me, I'm an exception to that. In the original game, the system design is very rigid and brutal on players. The only way to save is by using an ink ribbon at a typewriter, which is a limited resource. So players have to carefully choose when and where to save. In the remake, players do not have to use ink ribbons to save, and there are also checkpoints to help assist during challenging sections. However, on the hardcore mode, players are reverted back to the 1998 save system with ink ribbons and no checkpoints. The original game also has a very linear progression and does not give players a lot of freedom in deciding the order in which they complete puzzles. While the remake has an overarching linear gameplay, there is more leeway in the order that players complete certain sections. Players also have the ability to revisit previous locations throughout the game as they unlock more paths. As far as feedback goes, players receive a very limited amount in the 1998 version. When the characters receive an initial injury, they groan and some blood splatters from the attack. In the inventory menu, players can view their health status with the ECG at the top of their screen. It displays either fine green, caution yellow, caution orange, danger red, or poison purple. Depending on where their health bar is at, players will also see their characters perform a limp animation of varying degrees of injury. In the remake, players are given more cues as to how their character is doing. Characters still groan and have blood spatter when they are injured, except this time bloodstains will stay on their clothing until healed. The controller will vibrate as well to also signal to players that they have been attacked. Players can still use their inventory menu to check their character's health via the ECG, which now appears on the bottom left. Characters will also still limp with varying degrees based on their health bar. Overall, the system design in the remake is greatly improved by focusing less on punitive challenge and more on player-centered tension. Nowadays, the harsh gameplay of limited saves, extremely limited resources, and difficult controls feels unfair. The remake fixes this by moving away from punishments to create stress and anxiety, and instead uses the atmosphere to put players in the survival horror setting. The game still provides many difficult challenges, but they feel more manageable, and most of all, more fair to players. Player immersion is also greatly enhanced by making a multi-sensory feedback system. Pacing in the original game was fairly slow, which built a sense of dread. There would be long moments of silence which keeps players on the edge of their seat as they anticipate an attack. The remake keeps these feelings of dread anticipation, but it does so with a faster pace. It also keeps the theme of long stretches of silence to lead up to attacks, which is a staple to survival horror games. The difficulty is also greatly improved in the remake. While the original forces players to have very limited saves and resources, the remake gives players the option of choosing this more grueling gameplay via the difficulty setting. The more modern controls makes it easier to navigate through Raccoon City and dodge enemies' attacks. The transition between combat and exploration feels smoother overall. I also find that it's very difficult to figure out what the next step is in the 1998 title. There's very little guidance on where to go or what to do, and I definitely found myself lost more than a couple times. To counter that, however, this element of constantly finding yourself lost does set the mood of survival horror and gives players a feeling of dread. This is because players have to wander around more to figure out the next step, which would often put them into more dangerous encounters. The 2019 title definitely still has moments where players have to stop and figure out what the next move is, but it isn't nearly as frequent. There are also far more visual clues, hints and documents, and item descriptions, as well as the map hinting at where to go or what to do next. Boss fights are also greatly improved upon in the remake. In the original, players were stuck in a loop of run, point, shoot with your most powerful gun, and repeat until the boss was dead. The remake expands upon this by bosses having specific weak points to hit, as well as different means to slow them down or damage them. There's a lot more depth to the fights now, which makes a more interesting gameplay experience. The original game heavily focuses on causing players fear through control limitations. The clunky controls heightened players' anxiety because it was very easy to make mistakes, like getting trapped in corners or charging straight into enemies' undead arms. Some enemies are also hidden just outside of the camera angle, preventing players from seeing them until it's too late. The remake provides players with a smooth gameplay experience due to modern-day controls. It focuses on creating fear through the atmosphere with realistic lighting, sound, characters, and 3D environments. The 1998 release creates emotional engagement in players by making them feel helpless and isolated. The 2019 release focuses on creating fear through immersion and realism, which makes players feel like they are truly being hunted. As I mentioned earlier, technology has advanced dramatically from 1998 and 2019. While the original game uses tank controls, fixed cameras, and static backgrounds, the remake uses RE Engine to create a fully fleshed out 3D space with dynamic lighting and environments. While the technology from 1998 is outdated compared to today's standards, they used really creative methods to work around the constraints. Using static backgrounds allowed Capcom to make highly detailed environments while not using nearly as much hardware. The only actual 3D models were things that players would interact with. Examples of this are the doors, item boxes, movable props, etc. All of these elements are able to provide a fairly realistic gameplay experience in 1998. The enemy AI is also greatly improved in the remake. The AI in the original had predictable movement patterns that players could easily dodge if they had a handle on tank controls. In the remake, the enemy AI is less predictable and it can be harder to successfully dodge their attacks. The best example of improved enemy AI is the Tyrant, or Mr. X as he's better known. In the original game, Mr. X's appearances were always scripted and he could be easily shot down or dodged. In the remake, however, this is far from the case. Mr. X's AI is extremely intelligent and is nearly impossible to avoid. After he is triggered into the police station, he will unrelentingly hunt and chase players down. If players cause too much noise by moving objects or running, Mr. X will hear them even if he's on the other side of the station. Once he is in pursuit, he is difficult to lose. This causes problems because players have to choose between walking slowly to avoid attracting lickers, which allows Mr. X to catch up, or running away from Mr. X, which will cause lickers to chase you as well. Overall, the remake really creates many stressful situations for players, purely because of Mr. X. No matter how many times I've played this game, I still get scared of him catching up to me while I'm trying to solve puzzles or stealth through liquor-infested hallways. The amount of times I've hid in safe rooms waiting for him to leave is a little embarrassing, but a testament to a good gameplay mechanic. While comparing the two games based on the technology, it is clear that the remake greatly exceeds the original. However, the original took the constraints they had and found clever ways to work around them. While it would be considered outdated by today's standards, it's important to recognize how truly impressive the 1998 release was for its time. We wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for the games like this that paved the way for us. Player expectations have drastically changed from the 90s to now. As I covered in the previous section, the original game is definitely aimed for more hardcore players. It requires patience, memorization, and resource management. The game also has very little handholding and basically sends players out to figure it out on their own. The remake, however, has a broader target audience. Players can choose their difficulty level, which offers an appealing gameplay experience for both beginners and experts. There are also gameplay tutorials, checkpoints, and accessibility settings to help aid players in their gameplay experience. The game itself is designed for both veterans to the series as well as newcomers. The gameplay experience went from enduring the challenge to enjoying the experience, while still keeping a focus on tension and fear. One of the main reasons the remake is so powerful is because it takes the overall aesthetics from the original game and brings it into a modern setting. There is very little difference between the environmental layouts from each game. I played the remake many times before I played the original, which allowed me to easily navigate through the environments. So if the layouts are essentially the same, what makes it so much better in the remake? Mood and cleaned up layouts. Throughout the majority of the original game, there is very little variety when it comes to mood, lighting, and color palette. The remake, however, truly sets the survival horror mood, using a variety of different lighting and color palettes based on different rooms and overall environments. My favorite example of this is right in the beginning of the game. Players have to run through streets filled with crashed cars on fire, dodge zombies, all the while it's raining down on you. The darkness and cool tone colors makes you feel truly stranded, isolated, cold, and scared. When you finally reach the massive Raccoon City Police Department, you open up the doors and are immediately flooded with warm lighting as you step into this brand new environment. It's breathtaking every time, no matter how many times I played it. The original game still has the same moment, but it doesn't hit quite as hard because there doesn't feel like there is that much of a difference between the aesthetics of the outside and inside of the RPD. The remake puts players into mostly dark environments, which means that you have to rely on your character's flashlight. This helps to build horror because there's only so far you can see using your flashlight, and enemies are always hiding around the corner or in dark shadows. Because these mechanics were not possible back in 1998, they instead relied on hiding enemies on the other side of camera angles to startle players. My favorite jump scare in the original is during a door opening sequence. Players have been through many different doors at this point, so they wouldn't think twice about it. Except this time, when the door opens, 2 zombies charge through at players, forcing them into combat. To this day, it is still such an innovative way to startle players, because who would expect it? Door opening animations were supposed to be a safe break from the horror, and suddenly it wasn't anymore. Even though this only happens once, it keeps players anxious while opening every door for the rest of the game. The remake also cleans up the layout from the original game. I really like the overall changes they made level design wise because it streamlines areas and takes out unnecessary hallways or rooms to make gameplay smoother. I will say though that no matter how many times I play the remake, I still find myself slightly confused on how to get to certain sections while traveling in the sewers. I think it's just because it's a little twisty, a lot of it looks the same, and there's points of no return where you have to find a different path to get back to where you were. I think this could have been cleaned up a bit, but it's really the only confusing section in the game, so I can't complain too much. Besides gameplay mechanics and visuals, the dialogue is also improved upon in the remake. The original features fairly campy lines that disrupts the survival horror mood, as well as players' immersion. Now don't get me wrong, I love how campy the original is. And truthfully, there are still plenty of over-the-top lines in the remake. The difference between the two is that it is handled better in the remake. The tone shift flows more naturally and doesn't quite break players out of the gameplay as much as the original. I think because the cheesier dialogue is sandwiched in between the realistic horror built into the story, motion capture animations, and the overall environments, it doesn't stand out as much. If anything, it gives players a small break from the high anxiety during the rest of the game. Plus, it wouldn't be a Resident Evil game if there weren't any cheesy lines. A consistent issue in both the original and the remake is that the environments become less interesting as the game progresses. Without a doubt, the RPD is the most interesting section to explore in both games. The sewers and lab just feel more linear, offering little in terms of exploration or visual variety. This is an overarching problem with the majority of Resident Evil games. The Spencer Mansion was the most interesting environment in RE1, and so was the village in RE4. Overall, it feels like more attention to detail is devoted to the early areas, but the rest of the game environments just feels like it pales in comparison. I will say that the remix version of the sewers and lab are greatly improved upon in comparison to the original, but it still isn't as interesting as the RPD. From a story perspective, this progression does make sense. The horror and confusion naturally fades as players begin to understand what's happening. Still, it would have been more engaging if the later areas offered the same level of intrigue and exploration as the opening sections. Alright, I know I've been talking very highly on the remake, but this is where I'm going to switch it up a bit. In the original, FMV cutscenes, in-game static camera cutscenes, as well as documents players find, all came together to tell the story. Like I said before, the majority of the voice acting was pretty campy, and the animation during the in-game cutscenes doesn't really have a whole lot to offer due to budget and technological constraints. Because of this, the animation wasn't able to rely on cinematic storytelling. The remake, however, due to technology being greatly improved, has fully fleshed out dialogue with more emotional depth, seamless cutscenes that blend between gameplay and storytelling, realistic motion capture animation, as well as a deeper emotional connection to the characters and the relationships they form during the game. But with all that being said, the remake is missing a very critical part of the story from the original game, which is the A and B scenarios. In the original, players choose to play as either Claire or Leon. When players completed one of these campaigns, the A scenario, they would unlock a second campaign, the B scenario, for the other character. So for example, if you beat Claire's A scenario, you would unlock Leon's B scenario, and vice versa. The B scenario allows players to see what the other character was doing throughout the game. There's also places where what you do in the A scenario will affect the B scenario. For example, there's a room in the RPD basement where the A scenario character can take a machine gun and a side pack from a locker. However, if they do, the B scenario character will not have access to it during their run. The A character also fights separate bosses from the B character, giving players more experiences with different enemies. Not only is there a difference between one character's A scenario and their counterpart's B scenario, Claire's A is very different from her own B scenario, and the same goes for Leon. An example of this is in Claire A, Sherry runs off, and in Leon B, we see that she actually has a brief run-in with Ada. Also in Claire A, Birkin infects Sherry with the G virus, and Claire has to make a vaccine for her. She then asks Leon to get Sherry, which you do during Leon B. However, neither of these plot points happen in Leon A and Claire B. Ada's death is also different between Leon's two different scenarios. In Leon A, she dies by Annette shooting her, which causes her to fall off the railing. In Leon B, Ada dies by saving Leon from Mr. X. All of these changes give players a reason to play the 4 different scenarios because they get a different story and experience each time. This was very innovative for its time. While the remake revives the A and B scenarios, it is done extremely poorly. The characters' B scenarios offer very little variety to their A scenario. There are small changes like who gets to the RPD first, the order in which you do puzzles, variations to puzzle solutions, as well as a bonus weapon. In the B scenario, players get to fight the final boss as well as see the true completed ending, which is also true in the original game. Unfortunately, these are the only differences between A and B scenarios. There are also many inconsistencies in the story if you're trying to piece together one character's A scenario with their counterpart's B scenario. To make things less confusing, I'm going to use Claire's A scenario and Leon's B scenario, since this is the canon story anyways. During Leon B, you end up fighting all of the same bosses that you did in Claire A in the exact same spots. This obviously makes no sense because Claire already defeated them. Also, somehow all of the puzzles have been reset or have different solutions for Leon after Claire completed them. Not to mention, there are many points throughout the whole game where it doesn't make any logical sense that Claire and Leon didn't end up running into each other. Overall, the A and B scenarios don't really offer any replay value, and one character's A scenario does not connect with the other's B. This is extremely disappointing because they had so much room for potential to really expand upon this like they did in the original. In an interview Rely on Horror had with the producers of the Resident Evil 2 remake, they said that they were going to remove the A and B scenarios and instead have players choose between playing as Leon or Claire, and there would be no connecting campaign between the two's experiences. They said they didn't want to spread the story across 4 different playthroughs and instead wanted a more streamlined gameplay experience for players. So, why do we have the B scenarios option? Unfortunately, I couldn't find any information on when and why the change happened. However, it is clear that its implementation was rushed. So instead of having 4 different unique gameplay experiences like the original, the remake has 2 different campaigns with 2 bonus ones that have slight variations. This change offers a more streamlined gameplay experience, but throws away the unique narrative complexity that the original gave us. The A and B structure technically remains, but only in name. This is truly my biggest gripe with the remake, and it makes me upset every time I play it. The original also just handles the overarching story better than the remake did. It really expands upon the events that took place in Resident Evil 1 and delves more into what was truly happening in Raccoon City and Umbrella's secrets. The remake has all the same plot points as the original, but it doesn't go into as much detail and barely touches on anything from RE1. A good example of this is Ada's story. In the original, you find out that Ada is in Raccoon City trying to find her boyfriend John, a scientist employed by Umbrella. This is a reference to RE1 because in that game, you find a letter from John to Ada. Later on in RE2, players discover that Ada was only dating John to uncover secrets about Umbrella because she was a spy. In the remake, Ada introduces herself to Leon as an FBI agent. There is no mention of John as well as no hints about Ada being a spy until the very end when Annette tells Leon. Changes like this make the remake feel more like a standalone game, which makes sense because they wanted to invite new players. However, removing so many aspects that tie it to the original game feels unnecessary. The original RE2 is still very playable for people who didn't play the first one because the connections to RE1 are explained. It doesn't rely on players having pre-existing knowledge from the first game, which is why I think the remake could have leaned into the overarching lore more. The remake completely improves upon the core mechanics, system design, player experience, technology, accessibility, aesthetics, and presentation. It is a far more accessible game for players because they no longer have to use tank controls and fixed camera angles. The graphics for the environments, character models, and everything else are completely modernized and truly feel realistic. When you play the game, it really feels like you've stepped foot into Raccoon City. However, the original handles the overarching story and the A and B scenarios better than the remake does. The original builds upon the lore of Resident Evil while the remake just hits the main plot points. The A and B scenarios feel like they were added in without much thought for truly providing players with a unique gameplay experience. So now for the moment we've all been waiting for. Which game is actually better? From a technical standpoint, the remake is, but from a storytelling standpoint, the original is. I have played the remake far more times than the original, and that's because it's more accessible and visually appealing. However, every time I find myself wishing the story had the same depth that the original did. In an ideal world, Capcom would have taken the full story and the 4 different playthroughs from the original and implemented it into the remake using the cinematic visuals and more grounded dialogue. Unfortunately, we don't have that, but what we do have is a beautifully made remake that brings the world of Resident Evil alive once again. What it's lacking in story depth, it completely makes up for with visuals, cinematic storytelling, mechanics, and more. Because the original faced so many budget and technological constraints, they focused more on creating a fleshed out story. The remake, on the other hand, had access to modern day technology, so they focused more on gameplay and mechanics. Both the 1998 and 2019 versions of Resident Evil 2 offer players with a unique, groundbreaking gameplay experience. And I don't know about you, but I think another playthrough is definitely calling my name.